Today is February the 16th, 2017. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University, the Oklahoma World History Research Program, which is part of the OSU Library. And today we are in the Angie DeVoe room in the OSU Library to speak with Steve Dobbs, who is the Manager of Landscape Services here at OSU. So thank you for coming today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're going to be talking about quite a few things today, but let's start by learning a little bit about you. When and where were you born?
Well, I was actually born in Pontiac, Michigan. My parents were, my mom was from Arkansas, my dad Oklahoma, but they met and married in Pontiac. They were working up in that area. So I was born there, but only lived there 6 weeks before they came back to Oklahoma. And you want the year?
Sure, if you're willing to give it.
Sure. It was February 26, 1959.
Oh, okay. Early happy birthday then.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We should have planned it on that.
Have cake and celebrate.
So when they moved back to Oklahoma,
Yes.
where were they?
Moved back to Sallisaw, Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma, and that's where my dad's family lived and where he was raised.
Okay. And what did they do for a living?
His parents were farmers predominantly, and he had 10 brothers and sisters.
Okay.
There were 11 kids total. The other unique thing about that is all of his siblings, including him, their first names start with O, of all things. Yes.
Otis and Owen and...
Those are two, but not many that are that common, and most of them went by a nickname or a middle name even.
Well, what did they farm? Cattle or?
They had cattle and did hay, and I remember my dad talking about watermelon crop as well, kind of in the bottom land there near Sallisaw.
So as a youngster, did you have chores on the farm?
Absolutely.
Such as?
Well, raised on a farm with cattle, and I always tease that when I left for college, my dad bought a riding lawnmower and a round baler. So we did a lot of hay with square bells and cattle chores, and then it was my responsibility to mow the lawn even at that time. And we lived in a couple of different places, had a garden at one of those locations, but not a big routine part of our family.
Well, do you remember driving the first tractor? How old you were?
Oh goodness, probably 11 or 12.
Oh, pretty young.
Yes, young. Helping feed, and then again raking hay to bale the hay. My job was on a little Ford to rake the hay up before they baled it.
How many brothers and sisters did you?
I only have one sister.
Okay, so it fell up.
Yes, and she's 10 years younger.
So helping was your choice.
Yes, that was my responsibility for sure.
Even through high school?
Yes, absolutely, through high school for sure, yes.
And at that point, would he pay you for helping, or just give you money when you needed it?
Well, he, my expenses, things that I did were kind of my payment. I never really got a paycheck per se or a checking account, but he reminded me frequently when I asked for money that it was, for the help that I provided with him. So.
Well, did you have a favorite part of having that experience on the farm?
I always enjoyed being outside for sure, and the cattle, I really have enjoyed the cattle part, and even to this day we've dabbled a little bit in cattle as well. So those are probably my favorite memories, just being outside and really kind of enjoyed working with the cattle and helping him watch over them and feed them and doctor them when we needed to as well.
I'm assuming you must have been in FAA or 4-H or something?
Well, I was not an FFA.
Yeah, FFA.
I was in 4-H though, and the reason for that, my mom was a 4-H leader, and I started a little bit later, but that really had a big impact on my career decision and public speaking and different things like that. FFA conflicted. I did band in high school as well, and that conflicted a little bit, and so I never did the FFA path, but definitely involved in 4-H right up until college.
And did you come to Roundup?
Absolutely. That's what got me really connected to OSU, made it feel more like home. Early on, that was really beneficial. And again, just the opportunities to go to the talks and do the competitions really helped shape my life.
Well, you said you were in the band. What instrument did you play? I
played alto saxophone, and I took piano lessons when I was smaller. So there's that artistic connection that helps now, you know, with my degree that I pursued, but I can't even get a note out of a saxophone now, and I haven't touched a piano in years.
Well, so were you in the band when you came here?
No.
Didn't do that.
No.
So your favorite subject in high school would have been?
Well, you know, I liked science for sure. Science was very intriguing to me. I have a most memorable teacher, probably older in high school, which would have been an English teacher. She was very strict, Mrs. Scott, extremely strict, but really pushed us on writing and you know, doing essays at that time and early on, and of course I was indebted to her when I got in college, and it's paid off, you know, even afterwards with some opportunities that I had too in writing.
Sure. So where did you go to high school?
Salazar, yes.
And you graduated what year?
In '77.
Okay.
And so I actually was raised in a community called McKee. Very interesting little scenario there. Had a Vian address. Lived in a community in McKee, but attended Salazar High School, and it just happened to be because of the side of the road that we lived on had the Vian address, but the Salazar School District. But McKee was you know, a town that had a store and all the different things when the railroad came through, and there was a school. My dad actually, you know, went to school at McKee, but now it's you know, just a street and a railroad crossing, and the school building still resides, and there's some history and people who have updated and renovated and kept that going with kind of a little museum, community center.
So you graduate from high school and you're deciding what you might want to do or where you might want to go. What comes into play there?
Yes, I knew I wanted to go to OSU. There was no other options, you know, at that time because of 4-H Roundup and just, again, that familiarity. I had narrowed it down to veterinary type things or plants, horticulture, because I had a love for both. And it's interesting, I chose horticulture thinking I wouldn't have to take as much chemistry, and ended up taking probably just as much early on in undergraduate. But once you know, I always had that background in 4-H, helped mold I had a plant science program area, I guess you would say, in 4-H, so I did some container gardening, had grandparents on my mother's side that were avid gardeners, so I got a little bit of it from them, and then neighbors that I enjoyed just going and listening to him talk about his plants and his flowers, so I always had an interest. But I went with horticulture, and then when I got up here to school and started on the classes, I never looked back. It was the right connection.
You have a green thumb?
I do, yes. I think I would say that I have a green thumb.
So where did you live when you came to campus?
My freshman year was in a dorm, Wilhelm, which is no longer here, of course. And then made some good friends, but the summer after my freshman year, I got a call from some guys that lived over in eastern Oklahoma that kind of knew a little bit about me and my family, that they were members of Farmhouse fraternity, and went on a float trip summer thing with them, and really genuine, sincere farm type guys, and got asked to rush or pledge Farmhouse. So I did that my sophomore year, and it was very nice. Now, I'd kind of looked at some of that before I was a freshman coming on up, but some of them I just wasn't a very good fit with, but this one had a completely different experience for me.
And from that point on, you lived in the
I
farmhouse?
did, so I lived in Farmhouse, the old one that's no longer there now too, on the north side of campus, but that was a great experience for me too, because I didn't have brothers, and so now all of a sudden you have, 100 brothers, if you will, and just lifelong connections, and a lot, not everybody was an ag major, but a big number of them were from smaller communities across the state, and so just great connections and lifelong friends.
Did you have to do anything in particular for pledging that you want to share?
Well,
anything that sticks out?
I think the motto really for Farmhouse is builders of men, and so there's the expectation right off the bat that school is your priority and grades are important, and so I think that challenge of helping somebody remember why you're in college, it's not just to come and party and have a great time, had fun as well, of course, but I think it was just that challenge of this is a great time to shape yourself and get prepared for your future, and so it was really good experience.
And did you have a house mother?
We did, yes.
Or a couple? Or
house mother, she was older, and she helped us with, when a button would fall off and all those kinds of things too, but she also helped us with etiquette and how to set the table and manners in front of women, and so it was really a good, like I say, an all-around good experience.
Do you recall her name?
Yes, Bobby McVeigh.
Was she there your 3 years?
She was, yes. Yeah.
And did the farmhouse win any homecoming decorations while you were there?
We didn't do homecoming house decorations then because we were on the north side. And so when I pledged, there was a fraternity next to us. There were only two on that side, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and that house is not there any longer either. So we kind of called ourselves the North Side Greeks. And we did do some picnics occasionally from time to time, but because it was kind of isolated, we didn't do it. And now we participated in homecoming. There were sign competitions and all the volunteer, community service type things that we would do as part of it, but not house decorations. Now, of course, they're on the south side and they do participate.
Well, how often would you go home?
Not very often. The other thing I remember coming up here as a freshman, I had a walking cast on, of all things. I had broken a toe pretty severely water skiing a few weeks before school started, and came up here with a walking cast on, and I remember hiking all over campus with that thing on and trying to manage that. But it was a pretty good little drive, 2.5, 2 hours. Well, at that time it was probably 3 hours. We didn't have the turnpike really. And and when I definitely got in the fraternity, there was just way too much going on, So I didn't get home, obviously holidays, those types of things, maybe a couple of extra times through the semester, but not very much.
Well, did you have your own car?
I did have my own car. Yes.
So you brought yourself the first? I
brought myself. I see it now, parents moving everybody in, and I came by myself,
And everything you needed was in one car?
And it was in one car, it absolutely was.
Times have changed.
It is so true. So true.
Well, had anyone else in your family come to OSU?
No, neither one of my parents had a college education. So, some of my dad's siblings, a couple of them had gone on for college degree, but my mom only had one sibling and he did not have a college degree either. So, again, I think that 4-H thing and that connection, and I had an aunt, one of my dad's sisters, who had a college degree from Connors and then OSU, and she was in the extension service. And so she really was a great inspiration to me, and kind of challenged and coached me. And so attending college was always in the plans. A lot of my classmates did not, and there wasn't too many that came to OSU even. But yeah, it was always something I wanted to do, and then went on and got a master's degree as well. So.
Well, did you have to work your way through, or did you have help from home? Or
Well, of course, summer, worked hard to get support again from my family, but I did have work-study jobs when I was a student, so I did work, 15, 20 hours a week for probably the first couple of years. My senior year had pretty heavy class load and involved with the fraternity, so I don't remember working my senior year, but I did a couple of 3 years.
Well, working on a degree in horticulture, what was your plan after? What were you planning to do with that degree?
Well, I think as I went through classes, education was very important to me at that time. And so I kind of had a game plan to work for the extension service, like my aunt, and I ended up getting an assistantship between my junior and senior year in Rogers County with the extension service doing horticulture type programs. And so that's where I wrote my first newspaper column. Right off the bat, they let me do a weekly newspaper column, and did some programs and answered horticulture, gardening type questions, and really enjoyed it. And then after college, that's what I applied to do, was work for the extension service, and ended up getting a job in it.
Cool. Your English teacher came in handy on that.
Oh my gosh, that's what I was saying, not only for the columns, but probably through my extension career, which was 14 years, I was in different locations, and every place I was at, I wrote a gardening column. And then later on, after leaving extension, later on down, I ended up with the opportunity to write some books. So absolutely, it made a huge impact, that English teacher.
Paid attention.
I did. I really did.
So you graduated from OSU in
Yes.
81.
81.
Did your parents come for graduation?
Oh, absolutely. They were very excited, to have a kind of a first generation in their family to graduate from college. Yes, they came out. And they, through the year or college, they would probably try to come up once a semester, too. But I remember that day that they came for graduation.
Was the ceremony outside or in gallery?
It was in the College of Agriculture. I guess it was supposed to be outside, and it rained really bad, and so they moved us to the student union, the little, what's the small one in the student union? So there wasn't even room enough for people to sit down, the little theater. And so we didn't even get to hear our own graduation. We stood out in the hall and tried to hear it through speakers lined up, and then you could only have 1 or 2 family members sit in the little theater for just the College of Ag. And so stood out in the hall, tried to listen to it, and then we walked across the stage and got our diploma. So it was kind of interesting.
Kind of different.
Yeah, very different. But still felt good, to get that diploma.
Well, when you were here as a student, did you have a favorite place?
You know, I enjoyed Theta Pond, of course, just because of that outdoor space, but I always enjoyed being in the greenhouses too with the labs, and then out at the teaching arboretum, which is kind of adjoining the Botanical Garden now.
Okay.
So yes, but I had, you know, most of my classes were in Ag Hall, but I had some in Moral Hall, the English classes, and a marketing class in Saratoon Center that was huge, you know, like, seems like it was 400 people even at that time. It was crazy to be in a class that big.
Did you have a favorite professor?
Ray Campbell, who actually taught the very first horticulture class that I had, so it helped emphasize that I was on the right career path. He was a great teacher, and he was also my advisor, and then later became a mentor in extension. When I was in extension service, he actually got promoted out of the horticulture department and was, what would that be, associate extension director maybe, and so he kind of became my boss eventually too. Yep.
You said some key figures along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
And at that point, you had no idea that you might be back here to do
Oh,
what
it
you're
was
doing.
the furthest thing from my mind at that time, and so I've actually been, this is my third time back.
Okay, so let's back up and take us through. Once you graduated, take us through.
Okay, my first job was with the Extension Service, and I was an ag/horticulture agent in Muskogee County. So I worked with commercial horticulture and homeowner horticulture, started a master gardener program then, did the newspaper column, worked with 4-H youth, so we even started a horticulture 4-H club. They did some competition, so I did that 3 years, and I always kind of had a desire to continue education. Of course, that career in extension is teaching is education. Mm-hmm. And it was during that time Extension Service was really kind of encouraging, strongly encouraging its employees to go on and get a master's degree. So I was still single and wanted to, I applied at University of Arkansas in Georgia because I kind of wanted another school with some experience in horticulture, and I went with the one that I got the assistantship on to help pay for out-of-state tuition, which ended up being Arkansas. So I did that 2 years, and during that time with school I studied, it was a horticulture master's degree, but my research was in vegetables, okra of all things, because that's what they needed research on. And so I did research on okra seed germination, and help identify a pathogen that was causing problems with seed germination in okra for commercial farmers in Arkansas.
Southern popcorn, they say.
Yes, that is so true. Yep. Yeah, it's very popular in the southeast for sure.
So your master's was in what year did you get that?
Let's say I did that 84 to 86, and then still single, and thought, man, what an opportunity to be able to travel and get a job in a state where horticulture would be kind of a major industry. So I applied in California and Arizona, Florida, even Hawaii, and ended up with a job in Florida. And it was with the Extension Service, so I was a horticulture agent there in Pensacola. Did that 3 years, strictly horticulture, master gardeners, answering questions, commercial horticulture too. Got a promotion, fortunate enough to get a promotion and moved to southern Florida, Naples of all things, so the other end of the state, completely different growing zone. But I was a county extension director there, so I had administrative duties now, still with some horticulture responsibility, which was more commercial horticulture with vegetable production. At that time, that corridor of Florida provided winter vegetables for kind of the eastern seaboard, if you will. So grew vegetables in the winter months because of the milder climate. So I learned a ton of things there. Naples, of course, is a whole different, you know, Pensacola is very southern and Alabama-like. Naples was very wealthy and completely, you know, I wanted good experience and I got it for sure. Yeah, different growing zones and different cultures even.
And how long were you there?
Just a little over a year. And then I got a call from Ray Campbell with Extension Service who called and said, hey, there's an opening for Consumer Extension Horticulture Specialist with OSU. And we'd like for you to consider applying. And at that time it was over the state Master Gardener program. Host of the television show, Oklahoma Gardening, and then the consumer horticulture part for the state, or excuse me, the county agents. So help with fact sheets and doing training and programs for the county agents in horticulture, consumer horticulture, home horticulture. So, you know, I was like, oh, I gave it some thought, and I went in and turned my name in the hat and ended up with an interview. And because of my Master Gardener training background, and I felt like it was a great career move. And of course, I was fortunate to be able to move all those different times and get the master's degree, so that really helped improve my salary each time I moved. You know, I could get a little bit more, and came up, and it was a very intense interview. Had to do a seminar for the entire faculty, lots of individual interviews, and then a TV segment off the cuff pretty much. They told you how long and took you out at the studio gardens at that time, which was very small, and let you look around and you chose what you wanted to talk about, and then they had the camera there and taped a segment with you, and ended up with that job and moved back and did that for 5 years.
So your 4-H speech came in handy there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, what did you choose to talk about?
It was on strawberries at that time.
Not okra.
Not on okra, because of the time of year that I was here. I think it was May-ish, yeah, May, and then started the job in probably August, I think.
And did you enjoy doing the TV part?
You know, I loved, because I've always wanted to teach people about gardening at that time early on in my life, especially, or in my career. So I loved researching for it, and I thoroughly enjoyed the creativity with it and educating people and meeting so many different people with segments and stuff. I probably wasn't as thrilled about the camera part of it, but I knew it was a great way to reach a lot of people. And so I enjoyed it. I think what was a little unique is, you know, I just thought of it as an extension program, another way to educate people. And I even thought of it how I had been trained. You know, here's my audience. How do I seek out what my audience needs are, and how do I provide educational programming for them? And that's why I approached it. But the first time somebody asked me for my autograph, I was a little thrown by that. And that part was, you know, I finally had to get used to the fact that, you know, you're in somebody's living room every weekend on TV. It kind of changes the perception a little bit, which was awkward to me. But great avenue and a great history. That show has a great history still going on. I'm considered a classic now on the television show. They've archived some of those segments on YouTube, and I'm in the classics section. So that made me feel really old when I learned that.
But important.
Very important, yeah. Still keep track of some of the, how many hits or views it gets, and some of the ones I did are still very popular, which is very flattering.
Or did that experience help plan to get in this current job?
Well, you know, I kind of took a different route after that. Like I said, I was in extension for 14 years, and that was still extension.
Okay.
But my father passed away during that time in eastern Oklahoma, so we had the acreage and the cattle, and I just was really convicted to go back and help my mom. It was during that time I got married. So I moved back to Sallisaw, left extension, and had the cattle, but built a couple of greenhouses and started my own greenhouse business and did a little bit of landscaping and design and installation maintenance. But what I really enjoyed during that time was growing, you know, the plants and just trying to get people to use new things that were out there, because even in my extension career, I would always get in trouble with businesses because I would promote things that weren't always readily available. And I always felt like it's the chicken and the egg scenario. If people aren't going to ask you for it, you're probably never going to carry it. And we need to broaden the selection of plants for people because there were so many out there. And so I was able to, you know, tread through that with extension, but then finally I could grow them myself. So I did retail, and I'm out in the country, so it's not a big metropolitan area to get a lot of business. So I did wholesale too, where I could grow some things and take to nurseries. And did that, gosh, 8 years, I think. But during that time, I sold plants to University of Arkansas Fort Smith for their seasonal color displays. And that chancellor of the university there, it used to be a community college, junior college, and then it transitioned to a 4-year. Chancellor Joel Stubblefield, he had his administrative assistant call and ask if I would come in to talk plants. And so that's what I thought I was doing, is talking about plants that were growing. And he was very knowledgeable, and he knew about me because I didn't deal with him directly when I sold the plants. It turned out it was an interview. Kind of an informal interview to be the manager of their grounds and landscaping. And of course we were starting to have kids at that time, and my wife had stayed at home a little bit and wanted to a little bit more, so I needed to probably get something a little more serious with benefits. And the caveat was to help start an arboretum botanical garden just adjoining the campus, and it had a beautiful campus. And so I signed up to do that because I thought, wow, start a botanical garden. Didn't quite turn out that way. The job was very challenging, learned a lot, so you're managing on a large scale now. And so for sure all the extension experience came in, just learning cultural things, but I was able to design the seasonal color beds and do all that. But during my career there, he put me in an interim role over all of plant operations. So it was over maintenance and custodial and everything because of some retirements and some challenges. And he asked me to do it, and I turned him down, and then he called me back in a couple of weeks later and said, I really would like for you to do this. I need your help. And so what do you say at that time? But yes. And oh my goodness, that was a huge learning curve because I'm not very mechanical, but you find the right people to do it. And so it was really all about people. But then he became ill and passed away. And so they hired a new chancellor. The botanical garden idea went away, of course, and it became my permanent job. So I was kind of taken out of what my closest love was, which was the plant part. So I had to hire people under me and tried to do some of it with them, but it's just tough to do. Now, of course, it's not a big university like OSU, but that's where I was when I got the call from OSU the third time. And man, it was not even
Didn't have to ponder too long.
Well, I wasn't even expecting it. We were at my family home place, if you will, and my mom had passed away since that time. But I tell you, the leadership at that time didn't see the landscaping as important as the former one, and so I could see that a little bit. So I was kind of getting antsy, and I think some of that is, I'm a spiritual person, so I kind of feel like God was nudging me to say, I've got something else for you to do, so that's why it's getting a little uncomfortable for you, and you're feeling that way. And then, sure enough, got this call, and I still wasn't sure because OSU, my alma mater, of course, beautiful campus, but they weren't known for keeping up the campus grounds and landscape, really. It was always on the chopping block. The buildings were beautiful, but from a horticulture standpoint, walking around campus, a lot of people wouldn't know, but it was lacking for sure. And so I was a little bit hesitant because I didn't want to jump into a place that there wasn't the leadership that understood and got it. But I went ahead and put my name in just to see. It never hurts, Came up for an interview, and I kept hearing there was change and all the right things, but you still didn't know. And then got called back for another interview where I had to do a seminar again, a presentation. And there met even more people, and Ann Hargis was on the committee of that one. And so I could tell there was some seriousness about wanting change, but then you always have anxiety, will the support be there? But I was ready for the challenge, and I had kids at that time that were elementary, middle school age, and so we toyed with it, but made the decision, and so we all moved to Sallisaw. I came a few months earlier till they finished school. We still have our family farm. We rent out the pasture, the house we still have, and go back on long weekends. But gosh, ended up back at OSU for a third time, counting, my undergraduate. So.
Sounds like several of these jobs came looking for you. You weren't necessarily looking.
Yes, that's true. I've been very fortunate.
Well, that speaks to your reputation.
Well, thank you. But I tell you, I've been so blessed to have so many different educational opportunities, but work experiences. Oh my gosh, just, the education, all of the different things, the public speaking and educating people, but, in vegetables and ornamentals and design and growing, and so I've really been very, very blessed.
So you arrived on campus in
2010, and that would have been May probably. I suspect right even after commencement, yes.
5 years have seen some major changes out there.
Yes, actually 7, it'll be 2010.
Oh,
so,
do my math, yes.
Yes, so it'll be 7 years here in a couple of months, a couple of 3 months.
And in that time period, my gosh, you've got
it has
the topiaries and the irrigation.
Yes.
We need to talk about irrigation.
Yes. And it's, when I came, I would be honest, it was such a much bigger place. Right now we're responsible for over 800 acres. And so we do design, installation, maintenance, and we have a shop support group that helps with equipment, the maintenance, the mechanical issues. We have some mechanics, and then operators who use backhoes and the bigger equipment. So it was very overwhelming at first, just because there's so much to learn. I was fortunate that I knew the buildings, most of them, but gosh, if you think about how much it had changed even since I was here in 90 to 95, it was drastic, just buildings. So I had a learning curve for sure, but I had the basics from experience now at another university. But I mean, administration, they were serious about wanting change, and so they gave me 2 weeks to come up with a plan. And I was like, you got to be kidding. I can't even wrap my arms around what we're doing right now in 2 weeks. So they gave me a little bit more time. And I asked for the moon, of course. I was always taught to have your elevator speech ready, and didn't get the moon, but definitely got a few more employees, and was able to go towards a zone maintenance where, excuse me, one person early on was, all he did was prune shrubs all over campus, and he just rotated, and there were 1 or 2 mowers, and they just went all over campus. And so we went to zone maintenance. So we have 10 zones, and each zone is responsible for their own mowing and their own shrub pruning and those types of things. And so took baby steps, and I compare it to eating an elephant scenario. Often you have to take one bite at a time, and you figure out what's your most beneficial, biggest impact. And so first thing was changing the formal garden. There was some maintenance issues there. There was Bermuda grass along one of the raised beds, which I don't know who designed it or how it came about, but it required somebody to pick up a lawnmower, a push mower, mow this little narrow strip, and it would throw clippings into monkey grass, which was in the next bed. And monkey grass doesn't like hot, full sun very well. And so it was just not a good maintenance design. And then you had your pretty color in the middle, but it was pop-up sprays, and so it got wet and there were disease problems. So that was our first thing to tackle, was got rid of the Bermuda grass and put in shrubs, and converted it to drip irrigation. Because it was already irrigated, it was easy to convert. And I couldn't find an earthworm in the soil even after all these years of growing all the different plants. So we started adding organic matter, and now, you know, it's rich and organic, and earthworms like crazy, and a lot of improvements. But that was the first step, and because it was the most toured and photographed and most visible. And then we tackled some things around Theta Pond, and so we just kept working on that core part, and you know, it's just happened. I mean, we had a plan, and because we were able to do zone maintenance and get irrigation, that was the first couple of years. There was money already set aside, because literally the smaller staff at that time, all they did was drag water hoses during the day and try to mow and move water hoses around. And so it was not efficient use of time at all, because they couldn't do the attention to detail. You know, they couldn't do weed control and mulching and litter pickup, because all they did was mow and move water hoses and try to dodge sidewalks and pedestrians. You know, it was just a mess, because there was probably less than 10 acres irrigated at that time, which is just unbelievable in a campus setting like that. But all of that was already in place, and I just got on board and we helped design it. Now, I was very influential in helping design it with my team, because we wanted it to be water saving and water, really it's a large commercial design, but we wanted it to really be laid out well, so you're watering only turf and you're not overlapping and watering flower beds with turf irrigation. And so almost every landscape color bed is drip irrigation, which is extremely water efficient. And then turf beds have rotators that hug the ground closer with larger droplet size, and they spin versus just a big spray that blows with all of our Oklahoma wind. So it's very water efficient, but truly that changed the direction of how the campus looked, because we could get water, do it efficiently, water at night when you're supposed to, or early mornings, and then it freed up the staff to then do more things that needed to be done. So the water was huge, and it's so important. It's like any garden, if you gotta have good soil, but if you can't water it, you know, and we have our share of drought. So very water efficient. Now it's just part of every new building, and we're still not 100% irrigated, but we're, I don't know, 60% maybe.
At least the core.
The core is 100% for sure. Yes.
Well, about that same time period, you removed the crepe myrtles from in front of the library. Was that part of your, once you were here or before you came?
No, that was since I've been here too. And, you know, it was the library, and I would note that I work very closely with Nigel Jones, who's our university architect, because he's kind of that buildings and I'm the outside, but as a landscaper or landscape architect or designer, you want your landscape to complement the buildings, you know, not draw away from them or take away from them. And our campus buildings and architecture is phenomenal. So the library was one of those most photographed ones too, but it was overgrown crepe myrtles, and crepe myrtles are pretty, but a lot of undergrown junipers and mandinas, and it was just busy and just not attractive at all. So we just took it all out, got irrigation in, drip irrigation, and we really debated on our design. Do we give height to our plant material because of the scale of the building? And we just went with one of the most simple ones, evergreen all along the base to a certain point, because we did not want to take away from the architecture. So it's not a design where someone would be out enjoying that space. It's really to complement the building, which is phenomenal, and all the pictures and views and things there. Yeah. So it's much cleaner, crisper, a lot nicer.
And then the large planters.
The planters were already here in the front when I came. That was a donation through a donor, I think, through your dean's work and the foundation. And the planters helped spruce up the area, but you know, it adds color. It definitely adds color, but we've changed how we use planters. We still have planters on campus in certain areas, but I would reiterate too that we've not talked about this, but when I first came also, there was an update to the landscape master plan. So there's a campus master plan, which is the footprint of where buildings would go, and you try to guess where future buildings would go and where green space might be, but you just earmark it as green space. The campus landscape master plan was done many years ago, but it had not been updated. So again, that was already in the works when I came, so the committee to do that was in place, and I got in about 3 months into it and still got to participate. But the landscape master plan really helped look at where we've been, where we need to go, and then what are some challenges that we need to tackle. And so there were lots of them, of course, and then we prioritized where things were overgrown and needed to be updated, and where we would use more of a naturalistic landscape design versus a very formal that would go with the Neo-Georgian architecture. So that plan was completed in 2010 and implemented in 11. And so that helped us, again, direct irrigation guidelines, plant choices, and it changed hardscape things that people don't think about. You know, we may have had, gosh, 15, 20 different styles of trash cans all over campus, or 6 or 7 styles of benches, and pavers. And so we, with an on-call landscape architect in this committee, we decided on a standard, a landscape standard. So now benches are all the same, trash receptacles are all the same. Now there's some research that went into that. It matches the Neo-Georgian, but you know, we would quiz students, and do you like this trash receptacle or do you like this one? And what else do you need? This was part of the landscape master plan. And notoriously, wider sidewalks was a prominent request from students. And we found that students don't like to touch trash cans that have lids on them. You know, they just want a wide opening so they can just throw it in there and it's easy to do. And then we looked at how easy is it going to be able to clean it? Is it going to blow over in our crazy winds? And so it needs to have that style that matches our architecture. And so all of these standards were developed. And so now we implement them, and it's gradual. Most people don't even realize it, but it's making an impact. Again, it's very subtle. So with containers, where you've seen the new containers out on Monroe Street and some of the new designs, we have a certain style of container that we like to use. It's heavy duty, it has big volume, but they all have drip irrigation in them. So we don't have as much maintenance and hand watering. And at the base, they drain out into a permeable pad. So it could be, if it's sitting on pavers, we give space between the pavers so the water drains right down into the soil. Some it may be that you don't see it and it looks like it's sitting on concrete, but it's really hollow underneath with gravel under it. And that keeps it from looking slimy and running off on top of the concrete. The ones in the library, because we've not been able to redo the front of the library yet, those are still the old standard ones that water runs right off on the concrete. You know, so it's the color, thank goodness, takes away from some of those things that we could still improve on. But they're big, so we can add a lot of color, and that's what people see. That's the professionals nitpicking at the, but anything that we do, design-wise, if we can't maintain it, we're not successful. We're not successful at it. So it needs to be able to maintain it. So we've got more staff down in the core part of the campus versus out on the outskirts. So we can't have this intense landscape design out where we don't have many people. I don't have an open-ended budget for sure. But I can tell you that the support from administration and the vision from President Hargis and Mrs. Hargis, truly they're the ones that get the credit in this, because it's their vision that the outside should look as impressive and as important as the buildings and the inside of the buildings. And so they get it. Not a lot of administrators, sadly, and people with administrative authority get that, because usually landscape is the first thing that the budget's cut on, because it's the last thing that goes in. But under their direction and fundraising, oh my goodness, their campus beautification, fundraising and donor support, and just reallocating some funds for irrigation, that vision that they have is now, I just get to be fortunate enough to help make it happen. You know, it's their vision, and it's so obvious.
But you still have to make good choices on what you plant.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a lot that goes into that, because again, you know, there's that campus master plan, and we've got all these priorities, and we still have a ton of them to do. Like say, it's been baby steps, one bite at a time, and we're also involved in it. We have to step back often and look at the big picture ourselves to see how it has transformed. And it's very rewarding to see that. But yes, choosing the right plants for the right location, practicing what we were taught, and there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Have you had any epic failures?
Oh my goodness, yes. You know, the irrigation one even in itself is a challenge, because I've been taught, especially in Florida, you know, this is the way you irrigate, and there's research to support that. So like, you usually want to water for longer periods of time and not very often. And the reason for that is you want to water deeper and encourage deeper roots. And then they're more drought tolerant if they have deeper roots. If you water a little bit every day, you encourage shallow roots, and so the plant's not as healthy and will stress more. And you don't want to water turf grass, you know, like at 9, 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening. You want to do it early in the morning because if the foliage is wet longer, it will cause leaf diseases. And there's research to prove that. So from a residential standpoint, that's easy to manage, so to speak. But it is not easy to manage in hundreds of acres because you can't even water all your zones in the evening time. You know, because there's so many zones, if you water the amount of time you need to, it goes over and it gets into the evening. Well, that's a prime time students are out and about too. So we have drip irrigation watering in the early mornings. It may be even up till 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, but people don't know it, and it's still efficient. It's under the mulch. Turf stuff we still try to do at night, but we're having to, because every zone and every building is different as far as the soil around it. And it is this way at home horticulture too. You know, you bring in nasty, heavy, compacted clay, and you compact it and compact it and compact it because you don't want your building to fail or settle, and then we're expected to grow these wonderful landscapes. So we have places on campus that are almost like burial grounds of brick and rock from whatever was there before construction or however it's changed. And so you can't water very long to encourage deep roots because it runs right off the surface immediately because it's so compacted and hard. So we do have to look at each individual case. Yes, we've overwatered and we've underwatered and we've lost a few things, and now we're learning and getting it. And now we have more control because we have our own installation crew now. So we can amend the soils better, and we're now involved in design on the front side of a building, on the new building. So we can negotiate with utilities that this green space is truly green space, and please don't put utilities there so we can put trees there. And we want to amend the soil. So it's taken a long time to get where we're all talking on the same page. And yes, there's been many failures. And you know, because we design it in-house now, we know where it drains well or it doesn't drain well, and we've done the soil test and it's compacted, or always surprises. But you know, somebody who's not here every day, who's done a design and sent it in, they may have put something in and it stands in water, and it wasn't the right plant for that environment. So those have been huge changes, and that's one of the biggest things, the zone maintenance, but getting our own design team. And our design team sounds like a big group, it's 2 people. But having an installation crew has been huge, truly, because people say, well, you can go out and contract somebody to do that cheaper. Well, I would debate that for sure, but I can also promise you that your subcontractor and may not always follow what needs to be done. So the way it used to be is it was designed out of house, contracted, and then our guys only did maintenance. So they couldn't even look to see if it was planted properly or if it was truly the right tree that was specified, and was the irrigation put in correctly if there was irrigation. Like I said, there wasn't much. So we couldn't even see what was happening until the day it was done and they signed off on it and handed it over and said, now it's yours, you take care of it. Well, sadly, there were instances where trees, may have called for a Shumard oak and a pin oak was put in, which is not a good choice for us in our high pH, or tree ball and burlap still had nails in it, and the wrap was still on it, or the cages. I mean, lots of basic things. So now with our installation crew, we've designed it. We know it's going to be put in absolutely 100% like we want it. So the trees are planted correctly. We don't have to worry about any of it. We can amend the soil. We've been involved in the design. And that too has helped transform the success of it, for sure.
Well, do you grow your own trees?
We don't grow our own trees or shrubs. Well, and it's just a space issue. You can get really good quality trees and shrubs. Now we do have greenhouses and we grow our own seasonal color. We don't do mums, but we do pansies and all the summer stuff. And because perennials are becoming more popular, we are getting plugs or liners in of unique things that we can finish out and grow out ourselves and plant. And ultimately, and we're able to do this now, we are the land-grant university and we are a teaching institution, obviously. So everything we're doing on campus, we want to educate people as well. So we want people to come on campus and look at how many different kinds of trees we have now and how to properly do things by just looking and, oh, that's a new shrub or flower, and look, it's growing in shade, or, you know, we want people to come and see. And so we're having classes. We have a behind the scenes every year where people can come and we take them on tours. We're putting out signage using QR codes. So people with smartphones can now just scan that code and it tells you what the plant is and everything about it, has a picture of it. So we don't put a sign in the formal garden for every plant in the formal garden. There might be 200 plants in the formal garden in the summer. One sign that says, you want to know what's in the garden, scan here, and then it pulls up a picture of everyone. So we're really trying to make it educational as well.
Well, do you know which one's the oldest tree on campus?
Well, the thought is that it's a couple of trees around Old Central. So there's a sugarberry tree that looks like a hackberry that's pretty old, and I'm not going to remember off the top of my head exactly how old, and of all things, a red cedar that some folks despise, but it's been in pictures of some of the earlier times of Old Central even, so it's thought that it's a pretty old one too. And trees on campus dictate everything, so you know, that's a whole nother story right there. I could tell you all about trees even.
There's been a lot planted in the last
There
7 years.
Yes. And you know, one of the new people that I've been able to hire and be able to justify it is we have an urban forester now. And he's on my staff, and so with his overseeing that program, we've been able to hire students. We're now at Tree Campus USA, which just means you have to meet all these criteria to say trees are important to you and you have a budget for them and you're taking care of them and you're planting and you know how to manage it. So we've been successful to get that designation, I guess 6 years now. But he has inventoried every tree on campus. So we have over 2,000, and it's valued at millions of dollars, those trees, because he can take that data and calculate what a tree is worth. And we also know how much water runoff they're helping with and how much in sustainability efforts and oxygen and carbon sequestration and all this. But it's important to manage it that way because trees dictate everything we do. It dictates what kind of grass we grow under it, how much maintenance. Are we creating acorns on a sidewalk? Are we blocking a sign? Are we putting them over utilities? And so somebody's got to manage that and know how to plan better in the future. And then the other thing is he knows how many species we have. So we're heavy in shoe-marred oaks and bur oaks and ball cypress. So we don't plant any more of those now. We plant different species and we're trying to diversify because, like American elm, Dutch elm disease years ago, if you have too many of the same kind, you can wipe out your entire forest. And so we really strategically choose different species and ones that are not as disease prone, and so the diversification and that master planning of our urban forest has been huge too. And so lots of different ones. People would be shocked at how many different ones. And so we do tours as well on, you want a tree tour, you know, we do that a couple of times a
I
year.
noticed the two yellow, they turn yellow in the fall that are in front of the college bed as you go up the steps.
Yes, those are
So
ginkgos.
those were new.
Yes.
I hadn't seen them on campus before.
So people would be surprised at how many different types of trees there are, and some that look like it. You know, we've had a couple of places where people say, "Oh my goodness, you're planting a sweet gum tree there. What would you do that for?" Because most people think of a sweet gum tree getting really big and the balls on them, and it's new varieties that grow like an exclamation point, and so they only get 4 feet wide. Tall, so we can get scale to a building because they'll get, you know, maybe 3 stories tall, stay narrow, and then the balls fall just in the bed and don't get on the sidewalk. So there's lots of trees out there that people would be just amazed at their unique characteristics and why we've chosen to put them in that particular
You do a lot of research, sounds like.
We do, and we try to keep up with new things that are being released, and if it's an improved selection of something that we know will grow in Oklahoma or that's native to Oklahoma, we want to try to get our hands on it and use it in that right example. So years from now, people will come and get great ideas for landscaping at home.
Well, how do you keep up to date though? Would you go to conferences or do a lot of journal reading or
Yes,
what?
you know, the internet's made it easier, of course, with getting information from professional organizations, but we do all try to go keep up with, you know, whether it's whatever our particular background field is, but we try to keep up that way, newsletters. We work very closely with our constituents in the College of Ag through the Hort and Landscape Architecture Department, so we attend things that they have and they keep us in the loop. So we really try to keep up with things, yes, and stay on top of it.
I keep waiting for a dogwood tree.
That's a tough one, you know, dogwoods, yeah.
For Stillwater anyway.
You know, we had the dogwood anthracnose, and just, they're an understory tree, so they need acidic soil and they like protection and up under trees. So around Theta Pond is an ideal location, but now there's disease problems with some of them, and there's some Chinese dogwoods that are a little bit more tolerant, but they're not native, you know, to Oklahoma. So there's a place for those, but dogwoods, that's a tough one. It really is a hard one to find anymore.
Well, I noticed on my question too with the cypress tree that was been carved.
Yes.
What did your department have anything to do with that?
Yeah, we did that as well. That was an old one, and we could go back to his inventory, and he could tell us how big the width was and the trunk diameter and how tall it was because of his inventory. He uses laser tool that measures height and width of those trees, and so we can guesstimate kind of how old they were a little bit. But that one was struck by lightning in August in one of our freak summer storms that we had, and it split it really almost all the way to the ground, but it wasn't right down the middle, it was offset. So we were devastated because that's one of the ones right at the edge of the Theta Pond area. So what we did is we knew immediately we would try to sculpt it or carve it because of the size of the trunk. So we cut it off about 11 or 12 feet tall because we didn't know what we wanted to do with it. And then you have to let it cure because it's a green live tree. So we went, oh goodness, 3 months probably before we ever tackled it. And during that time, then as a team, we tried to decide what do we want it to be. And there were all kinds of suggestions. But we narrowed it down with our landscape architect to a boy or a student, if you want to, sitting on a stump, fishing out into the pond. And so we got some quotes, if you will, from people who do that. And there's one gentleman that I actually interviewed when I was host of the TV show that many years ago, who was still in business. That's all he does is carve trees. Made a really good living at it. He's from Tulsa. We felt like he was really in touch with kind of our vision, and we got some donor money through the foundation, through our Campus Beautification Fund, and got all that approved and scheduled him in here. Thought we'd let it cure enough, and the day he showed up, he found one little leaf on the bottom of that trunk where it was still trying to rejuvenate and grow back out because the roots were out the pollen. But he's extremely talented. His name is Clayton Koss, and he literally just draws markers where he visions it, and he doesn't use anything but a chainsaw. He did every bit of that with different sizes of chainsaws, and just twiddles away, and has a hole where the boy's hands are, and then we slid in a bamboo stick for the pole of the fishing pole, and then he seals it, and then we'll have to do that for the rest of its life. Now it won't be there forever because it will eventually decay, and it's already shrinking more and cracking because it was not as dry as we had hoped. Mm-hmm. But it's just remarkable how it turned out.
It is.
It's really special.
I didn't know how long it would last.
Yeah. Well, he has some that's lasted over 25 years, but they religiously take care of them, of course. This one, I'm not sure if we'll get that long out of it. Now, we've already planted another tree. I don't know if you realize, off to this side, another bald cypress tree because of that area. And one thing I would tell you too, Tanya, is in our landscape master plan, there is a component of it that really encourages us to add more public art on campus as part of the landscape, because those go hand in hand. Now, landscape architect and what we do in the formal garden is art. It's just living art. We still create designs and shapes using plant material and textures. So people don't always think of that as art, but it really is. But public art, and so we've got our topiaries that are public living art, if you will, and even the tree is art, because that's an artist that carved that. Mm-hmm. But we're also looking at bronze sculptures and things like that, because it's just one more element in the landscape that I think has a connection, or can create a connection to people. And so we've not talked about what our purpose of campus beautification is, but art just, now sometimes it's not always positive emotions, or people don't like it, because of different taste, but it creates discussion and challenges people to think and talk about it. And that's what a college experience is all about, is you develop and form your own beliefs and opinions and work ethics and things, and we're helping do that.
Well, it's a good place to go ahead and talk about.
Yes.
What the purpose of.
Well, we're not just here to mow and blow, which is how some places do approach it, but again, through our leadership, through President Hargis and administration, there's many more on board with him too, they realize that now, especially with colleges, it's a competition. You're trying to get the best students, and it's a competition, and so campus beautification plays a role in that. And so there's all kinds of studies and different things that talk about how, when they've done surveys where students talk about how the appearance of the campus influenced their choice to attend or played a part in it. And then there's some that even say that a student can make up their mind within the first 15 minutes that they step foot on campus based on the way it looks. So if a student's narrowed it down to 2 colleges and they're going to go on a visit, if one's got an attractive campus and it's clean and you don't see litter and it's colorful and there's uniqueness about it, that's going to stick out. And so we feel like it's a huge recruitment tool. And so we haven't done our own studies. We're working with Kyle Ray in discussions about trying to get it on the surveys just to see. But we know that it implies, if it's clean and it looks good, it implies that it's clean and it's safe and that you take care of your campus, therefore you're going to take care of your buildings and you're going to take care of my kids. Mm-hmm. And that's what it implies. And I think students take pride in it, as well as staff and visitors and alumni. Now you always have a few that say, my goodness, how much are you spending to do all of that? But we don't have a lot of that actually. People have jumped on board, and you know, I think you have less litter really, because people take, and we always have some because it blows out of dumpsters, it's windy or whatever, but you just don't have a lot of people throwing litter down, you know. And even with tailgaters coming, people see that, and so they're taking pride and they help clean up after their tailgate. And now there's still wear and tear and you know, some impacts from that, but you know, it's the first thing they see before they ever go inside a building and meet somebody even. And so that first impression is huge, and that's what we remind our staff of all the time. And look at the memories that the students make. So it's not just how it looks, but how they meet friends out in the public spaces or around the art piece, or sitting on a bench under a shade tree, or we get stories time and time again of how people proposed at the formal garden, or they carved their name in an old bench at that time, or you know, so those, and then weddings, that's the best flattery yet, you know, they want to have their wedding out on the campus because that's where they met. So, but I can tell you things have changed drastically from when I was in school here and stuff, from the standpoint of we get a really good reading on it by just watching social media. So you can see Twitter posts and any kind of social media. What are most of the pictures of the outside of the campus? And, oh, our campus is so beautiful, and isn't it pretty and clean? Now they don't say, oh, that's the best looking landscape and tree or whatever, but they get the hidden message that's with it. And so now we have athletics telling us they bring them over to get their picture, student athletes that they're recruiting in front of the topiaries, or the College of Agriculture brings their students over and takes their pictures in front of the new bronze horse pieces at the Welcome Plaza. Or even this week, Coach Sanchez told me he now, every time they bring in equestrian recruits, one of the stops is by the horses at the Welcome Plaza. I mean, people are starting to get it and understand, and that's exciting.
And take notice.
And take notice.
Well, how do they contact you virtually? I mean, for these type of comments, how do you hear
just, like I said, we just watch social media is a big part of it, but when we just cross paths, they're always saying, Steve, we wanted you to know we brought by our student and thank you for what you're doing, you know. And so the Welcome Plaza, you know, has a really special meeting with that purpose in mind.
I just visited that a couple of weeks ago for the first time, and it is impressive.
So we talked about campus beautification, and so, you know, if somebody drives around, they're going to see it, you know, if they're trying to get to a parking spot. And so the little things, attention to detail, make a huge difference too. The litter, how well the guys have maintained and mowed and all the different things. But we always knew that our true front door to the university for a new prospective student was getting out of the student union parking garage and walking into the alumni center or the student union. And that was probably our most unsightly view. And so for years we had a plan, and Kyle Ray actually challenged us to kind of step it up a notch as far as the design and the concept. And so we worked for a couple of 3 years on this design with my landscape architecture, Dave Brown, who gets a lot of credit in all this transformation. But Kyle said, this is where literally 30, 40, 50,000 kids come through with their parents and siblings and visitors and tours, and I wanted to really speak to who we are as a campus and what our message is, and Dave just did a phenomenal job. So everything down to where you park your car now, you know, an updated parking garage with the Atherton, so a nice impression. You have a nice grand walk into the student union or the alumni before you're kind of forced out into this driveway or the street. You immediately get those hardscape things we talked about in campus beautification, those routine patterns. But then there's this public art. So there's the saddle, and it's bronze, it's sculpture. Chose an artist, took, you know, a committee and months to come up with the artist to do it. And then she did the saddle and the mare and the foal. And so when even alumni that walk through it now, I think it speaks to them as well as prospective students. So you walk down under the columns and the arbor, and it's got the cowboy code of ethics and precast. So it talks about we're cowboys and our work ethic, and you know, we're not a cowboy because of how we dress. It's because of, you know, we're not afraid to face challenges. And I mean, so each column has a subtle message, and then when you walk out of the student union the other direction, there's more messages in our alma mater in that. And then the mare and the foal are bronze pieces, and it took 2 years to get those sculpted and cast at the foundry and then in place. So this has been ongoing for a while, and then fundraising through the foundation. But the mare and foal represents it perfectly. The mare is supposed to be the alumni or the older student, staff, faculty, parent even, who's kind of gone on through this experience, and the foal represents the bright-eyed student coming in, going to college, getting ready to come in, or here's an undergraduate ready to run out ahead and tackle the world. So they're just the way they look and where the placement of the foal is to the older one, kind of watching out over the younger one. And then we used students to give us input on it, even had students help with a naming contest, gave them the meaning behind it, but nothing else. And sure enough, 2 different students came up with naming the mare and the foal Proud and Immortal, and which fit perfectly with our alma mater. And the mare would be proud, of course, and the foal is immortal. And it's actually helped, I think, to explain what that means a little bit more. Immortal, not that we're going to live forever, but the fact that students, a younger population, will always be immortal on this campus. There'll always be younger generations coming through. And so just the message, we finally got approval from the John Wayne organization to use his famous quote that says, courage is not, I'm going to mess it up probably, but not being afraid to saddle up anyway. You know, if you fall off the horse, don't be afraid to saddle up anyway. And so we've got approval now to use that. So it's just one more subtle thing to say, you know, we're here to build your character. And so the bronze pieces, they're 1 1/4 lifetime size, so they're huge. So you then throw in all the lighting and the OSU, and so it was dedicated, that garden, on homecoming weekend that Friday, and by that evening there was already a proposal on that garden at the fountain. And so it's already doing what it needs to. Now, you know, there's some expenses to a garden like that because of utilities and everything. But man, that's one that will impact generations to come. So there's a little fountain. So when mom and dad are stressed and they're getting ready to send their kid to school here and they're on the tour, they can hang out and it's peaceful. Now, of course, we've, you know, just got it planted. There'll be shade trees and to help with education on the landscape. Again, every plant in that garden is native to the United States, many from Oklahoma and Texas. And so we'll have signage and labels, and so we're educating with our plant choices as well as the message of that welcome plaza. So that's been a huge success story with my staff, and I'm so proud of them. And all the way down to the person who's picking up the trash, to the designer and the installers. They're, you know, it takes a team for sure.
Sure, and that was 2016?
That was just done in the fall of 2016, yes.
So that's the most recent.
That would be. We've had several, but that was our most recent, yes.
What's on the horizon?
Well, we just finished a Japanese garden over at West Watkins Center on the north entrance. Again, a space that was an eyesore for years, and that's where a lot of visitors and conferences are held and international students, and it was just, it was atrocious, you know, but you just have to wait till funding comes available. And so had a concept. We've got lots of concepts out there. We just wait till they get the go-ahead. And so we just finished that one, and it looks really, really good, and it ties in with that international emphasis of West Watkins Center. But we're working on the east side now of that building, and we hope to tackle phase 2 of a new native plant corridor maybe this summer. And that was an area just north of the library. That walkway that runs east and west was, now we still need to improve some lighting, light fixtures and pedestrian poles and some pavers. We could spruce up a little bit more, but we don't have all the funding yet. But it was just turf grass areas and some overgrown plant material that was dying out, that was not the right place for it. And so with that corridor not being quite as formal, and we've got life sciences and botany and all those different groups, native plants is something we can do a better job of educating with. So that corridor, we've converted it from turf grass to native plants, and so gosh, the teaching opportunities are going to be phenomenal. But we've finished phase 1. So there's some seating venues inside it. We hope to get public art. We're still working with donors looking at that. There's a little path that works through there. We've teamed up with SGA Sustainability Group, and they gave us a little bit of a grant to help with some signage and benches. So we've used students in the designs even. But once it matures and grows, you'll walk through native plantings of flowers and grasses, so there'll be butterflies, there's going to be some bees. It's going to be a whole different experience for people versus a very sterile, formal lawn look again. Now we have those all over campus, they're important, but this is a place we thought, and we're creating pollinator gardens, so we're doing our part to help with hopefully attracting monarchs that come through on migration. So that's the environmental sustainable part we hope to support as well.
I was going to ask about monarchs.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of butterfly bushes and different ones. And so again, if somebody is into native plants and they want to see what they'll look like and some that they could use, there's some true natives in the Welcome Plaza, and there that are what you would see if you go on a forested walk or out in the prairies of Oklahoma. So it's just one more way to teach and educate.
Something else to know and learn.
Yes, oh my gosh, even ourselves, we've really stretched ourselves because there's hundreds of them in these gardens. You know, it's a big taking on, and so we'll have labels coming, and it'll help. And the thing with perennials, people have to be patient because we planted those late summer, fall, so now most of them are dormant. There's not a lot of evergreen ones. But this year they'll come out and we'll have to educate our own guys to say this is not a weed. This is truly what it's supposed to look like, because not all of them are horticulturists. That does the maintenance. So we have a little learning curve there, hoping they'll establish and get, and then, so there'll be some color. It'll look better than it did in the fall. But really year 2 is when it will just transform, because as any perennial, it takes 2 and 3 years for them to get established and mature and grow like they'll normally would. You know, it takes a while.
And you hope in that time period students will take shortcuts.
Well, we will get a few of those, and we try to direct with post and chain when we can. Some cases, that's the best way to show us where we need a sidewalk too. You know, so sometimes we will create those pathways, but most of the time, if it's truly just a shortcut and it's not necessary, we can guide that a little better with post and chain and signage for the most part.
In those 7 years, they've removed some sidewalks, like the ones directly behind the library that crisscross.
Yeah, no, that was just a quick fix. We have a concept for that International Mall area to be a forested garden, and this is one as requested by President Hargis. Actually, he sees that as a lot of trees and another hangout space for students with a lot of shade. So we've got the concept and the design. There'll be an art piece in the middle that will be natural looking. So it actually ties in with our native corridor on each side, but no funding on that one yet. You know, that's one we keep, anytime we get the opportunity to talk campus beautification, public art with donors, that's one we keep dangling out there trying to get excitement on.
Well, it will happen.
It will, yes, at some point, but right now, those old sidewalks, and so we've got lawn and it's irrigated now, but that is, and the new design will allow them to do those diagonal walks, because that's the normal way to, that's the natural way to cross there. Even if you watch our student tours, they don't follow the sidewalks, they go right across. So the Bermuda's taken it pretty well. We've got some compaction issues, but we don't stress over that one. But the new design will be perfect. It will look natural, and you can just crisscross and walk any way that you want to go. And still have space for student activities, some tents if need be. Anytime we design, we always try to design with our student in mind. And how can they use that space? Is it an intimate seating area just to hang out and get them outside? And you know, we've got some outdoor spaces where we've got plug-ins so they can charge their devices even, but at least they're outside still. And so we really think that through. And we do use landscape architecture students from time to time on certain projects to get ideas and just get that fresh thinking, and then it gives them some real world experience too.
So from education to recruitment, then there's the wellness aspect for those of us who work here. Do you want to
sure.
About that?
It goes hand in hand. We, you know, there's research that even shows just walking outside and being under a shade tree lowers blood pressure and all those things. So just nature in itself. So again, that's important. But we've done some specific things. We've gotten markers on certain sidewalks that show particular paths that an employee could walk a certain route, and it shows you what the distance is and has arrows that show that. So that's 2 walking trails, and there's even a QR code on those signs where you could scan in and find the trail that way. We have a new labyrinth garden that's over between Morrill and Bartlett that is truly an official sanctioned labyrinth, so you can walk and meditate, and there's certain paths within that garden. So that one was just done last year too. We have other walks that folks can, and we've worked with the different groups on campus, communications and student advising and different ones where you can go on a walking tour again, and you can learn some historical things outside. So there's some maps and different techie type things that folks can do, especially younger kids, that like these types of things. And then we have the Orange Grove, which was designed with students, for sure, students that we actually fussed at for tying slack lines to trees, and a slack line is like a tightrope, and it's a big thing where they tie them, attach them to the tree, but they crank and ratchet them so tight that we got broken branches or it can damage the trunks, and then they walk across them, and one student does yoga on it, and it's just another form of relaxation. And hammocks, same thing. And so we kind of were fussing at them, please, be careful, and most of the students were, but you still have a few that tear things up. So we got them together and we came up with a design, and it was named by the students too, and it's got a large group hammock, and this was funded by donor money again, the Merrick Foundation. And then we have poles versus trees, so they can attach hammocks and attach the slack line. And that was done 2 years ago, and we're replacing the group hammock already. It gets so much wear and tear. So the group one will hold 25 or more. They can just sit in the group hammock under big shade trees and just hang out outside, work on the computer, talk. Hammocks, oh my gosh, they're used often, and there's benches, and we tied that with art again. So we have panels that we've designed, and we use student art exhibits from the art department. So each semester we change it out with student art that's on display. And again, the students named it Orange Grove. That was the top through social media, and then we planted more trees. So with time, it really will be a perfect, wonderfully shaded place that you just hang out. There's a swing. And the kids love that kind of thing. The students love that kind of thing. And so use students to help design it as well. So that fits in with our campus healthy initiatives too.
And it's not just physical wellness, it's
mental, absolutely, mental and spiritual is part of it too. Just being able to be outside and reflect and get some good quiet time if they need it.
Well, where do you get your inspiration?
Well, a lot of it comes from experiences over my career, because I've been in several different career options, which I was telling you about earlier that I'm fortunate to have done. But I visit botanical gardens often, and I go to garden centers often, and I just look to see what's out there. I do reading. I've been a member of the Garden Writers Association for a very long time, and have been involved even with that board as an officer, and have written some books. So I think getting the opportunity to see gardens and other places is a big part of my inspiration, because it just creates ideas, and you see it, and then when you come back here and you have your own specific design or color that you want to do, then you can take bits and pieces of whether it's the plant texture and find something that's like it that would grow in Oklahoma. So I think just seeing gardens is a big part of it.
Do you sketch it out, or on the computer, or just visualize it?
With me, it's visualizing it, and I'm not a very good sketcher. That's why I have some really good landscape designers that help with that. But it's a team effort. We all are still involved in giving ideas, and design and trying to make sure we can maintain it again. And it's safe. Design on the campus is a little bit different than you would do in home garden or a botanical garden. You don't want to really create hidey-hole outdoor rooms. You want intimate, shady areas, but you want to be able to see in those spaces a little bit more. So safety is a big thing that we consider with our designs as well.
Walt Disney World comes to mind. Do you go there, you look at the plants and
I do. I enjoy going there. You know, our formal garden, we do a lot of really cool things with colors, and that's changed too. I mean, again, just unique color, seasonal color plants, and so I'm still real involved in the design of that one. We'll decide, okay, this year our main color theme is going to be, say this year it's chartreuse, believe it or not, and we always have orange in there. So we'll have a lot of chartreuse with orange, and so I work with my greenhouse grower and we figure out the design, and she gets the plants in and grows them out, and then that's how it comes to shape. And then we did that, came up with the color and the design last fall. Then she calculates the plants, and then we order the plants in October, November, get them in February, and then we grow them out and then plant after commencement. So it's about not quite a year in the works.
there seems to be a lot of activity right before commencement to make it look as good as it can look.
Well, and of course spring is a busy time trying to trim ornamental grasses and finish up the leaves that have fallen, and you know, just tidying things up and mulching, and so spring is really a busy time. And we try to wait until after commencement to do the seasonal summer color, because right now in the formal garden we have rye grain, which is not ryegrass. It's not annual ryegrass or perennial ryegrass. It is rye grain. It's a grain that's harvested for rye. So it's an agronomic crop. But we use it because it is green, like grass in the winter, and green's a spectacular color in the winter when you don't have any green. And then we can mow it, but it adds organic matter back to the garden. So we leave the clippings each time we mow, they fall, and then we till it in right before we plant, and it adds more organic matter. So it's a green manure crop that we're using as a formal crop. And then we plant it in the fall, and now we do the holiday Christmas lights. So we can walk on that to put in the lights in the formal garden. If we had pansies, they wouldn't take the foot traffic. So it's really worked out as an excellent crop design thing. And that's when I read about it, research years ago, that I just implemented, and it's working.
Gosh, it's just so much to know and remember and figure out. I'm impressed. Yeah. I love how it looks now.
Yeah,
It's improved immensely.
Yeah, so
and the 125th anniversary gardens were fabulous.
Yeah, we don't do that intense every year because we used a plant called Joseph's coat, and it just happens to be one that kind of would grow bushy like a hedge, and you can shear it repeatedly and form shapes with it. And so we had, 10 or 11 colors of that. And then actually, through an extensive design and planning, came up with images that we could replicate. So they're kind of one-dimensional, if you will, or maybe two-dimensional, depending how you look at it. But we had like the facade of a horse pulling a stagecoach wagon, and the facade of Old Central, and Pistol Pete, and a boot, and balloons, and all of that was to celebrate our 125th anniversary. So the borders of all those things were this Joseph's coat that we grew in the greenhouse, and then you plant it certain spacing, and as it grows together, you have to shear it to keep it like a little miniature hedge. And so it's high maintenance. So literally every week, 2 people were shearing to keep those shapes. And you know, the best view of that was a drone picture. I don't know if you got to see one of the drones that they flew over, and you could really see it, and it was spectacular. But we don't do that every year, because by the time that growing season was over, that poor horticulturist Kenny was ready to till that one up himself, because we teased him, he became Edward Scissorhands, because he literally just shearing. But he takes so much pride in it. It was just spectacular. Yeah, really nice.
We've covered a lot.
We have.
Anything we haven't covered?
Well,
What you want your legacy to be?
Well, my legacy would be change, for sure. And we've had this very conversation with my staff, because I challenge them all the time. You really are. We've heard the example of footprints in the sand, and how you're leaving your footprints. Well, my gosh, what we do, we're leaving a bigger footprint than people would even imagine. And so I've challenged them for a couple of years, what do you want your footprint to be? Because, it doesn't matter what you're doing, from what job, like I said, picking up litter, to you're leaving a footprint, and you're really literally making footprints when you walk across. And so that's been fun to challenge staff, but through that process, mine has changed. So I think we can say that campus beautification and landscaping changed drastically. How we do all of that during my tenure here with an awesome crew. So change would be my legacy.
You plan to stay till you retire?
I do. I have kids that are getting into high school, so I definitely don't want to move again.
So we should probably, your wife, you met her in Salazar?
No, actually, she's from Illinois, and we met through mutual friends in Tulsa.
Okay.
So she lived in Tulsa when I was in Stillwater in the 90s, early 90s, and we met that way, and dated a little over a year, and then got married, and then she moved to Salazar with me. But she's from Illinois originally, and her background is nursing. So she's a registered nurse and has a master's. So education has been very important to her. She's taught nursing, and here in Stillwater, she's doing educational things. She's right now doing diabetic education as a nurse. So.
Well, wellness and health are different.
Yes, yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Jo Alice, and she was raised on a dairy farm, and she had 6 brothers and sisters. So we had, and their names started with a J of all things. So we had some really unique things in common right off the bat. And we have 2 children, and daughter Ashlyn, who is 17 right now, and she's into showing cattle. So she's kind of taken up the interest with the cattle, and she is an FFA. And then a son Mason, who's 15, and he is doing really well in school with his grades, and kind of going down the maybe engineering science path, but he's very involved in soccer and does really well with soccer. So Stillwater's, they're adjusting. It takes some time with kids moving at that age, but I think they're all situated and found their niches now.
Maybe future cowboys and cowboys.
Absolutely. You never know. Hope so.
All right. Let me check real quick to see if there's anything we've forgotten. I was going to ask what your tools of the trade were, which I'm sure you mean in a typical day, and then we'll close.
Well, I think tools of the trade were getting back to the basics, if you will, kind of, because sometimes people want to put too much of a spin on all the science and research. So really just basics of planting things correctly, designing basically, designing with the basics and making it for easy maintenance. And then we mulch a lot. and that was not done before. So we bring in semi-loads. We try to figure out really affordable ways, but it makes things look better, but it does help with lessening plant stress and minimizing weeds and holding in moisture and moderating soil temperatures. And so mulch is probably something that a lot of people forgets about and cuts corners on, but it's a big part of what we do. Now, it doesn't get rid of Bermuda grass. You know, people want to, but you always will have to deal with Bermuda grass. It's going to grow in landscape fabric, over edging, under edging. So we always have to deal with it, getting into the landscape beds. And that requires some time and attention, where before it was kind of overlooked, but now it's important to us. But mulching has lots of benefits too. So that's probably one that we emphasize attention to detail in everything. But mulching is probably one that people would not have guessed that we take seriously too.
I think a couple of years ago you used pecan shells outside of the president's office area there.
We have, we use cocoa bean hulls one time too, but really, it's interesting that you asked that. The wind blows so harshly through these buildings. You know, all these buildings lined up, you're creating a wind tunnel. And so we've used different kinds of mulches that are good mulches, but blew out of the bed, literally. Matter of fact, we used pine bark in front of the library early on, and it blew it right out into the fountain. And so we have to use a mulch that packs down better, and once it gets wet, it stays in place. And now we don't mulch every bed every year. Now some we do, but most of them it's about a year and a half, 2-year process by the time it breaks down and we add more. But we use cottonseed hulls in the formal garden predominantly because it packs well, holds moisture, and we can till it in and leave it in, and it makes great organic matter. And then we use shredded hardwood bark. That's a byproduct of some industries where they're harvesting trees for paper as an industry, and then shred the bark off, and it seems to web together. So we try to use things that are sustainable byproducts too. But we've used pine needles, which is a good mulch in the southeast, but here it blew and rolled up just like you were rolling up to bale hay. It just windrowed it, blew right up. Didn't matter how we wet it down. Cedar mulch, and a lot of them float and wash. And then we have to take into consideration things that will smolder and not flame up real quickly in case somebody's, even though we're tobacco free or smoke free, we still have visitors and a few people who sneak on, and they may throw out a cigarette butt and it can catch the mulch on fire. So we have to find things that smolder a little bit longer versus, you know, catching on fire. So all kinds of fun things to think about.
You must work more than 8 hours a day.
There are times of the year, yes, for sure.
Do you have a favorite season?
I don't. I mean, I always like spring, of course, because it's right after winter. I would say spring and fall, because fall is a hot summer, and spring follows a cold, dull winter. But we try to, in our designs, offer things to give you multiple seasons. But for me, because summer, you know, it's growing and it's good. The heat is, I'm not a big fan of it being that hot because we're outside so much, but I love that fall color and that freshness and that, it's like, you know, a kind of sigh of relief. And then spring is like renewal. It is for gardens as well as me. It's, you know, I'm already flipping through the garden catalogs and seeds and trying to get ideas for next year.
Well, how much of your day spent outside?
Well, a typical day for me, you know, with all of our employees, a lot of it is administrative for sure, and budgeting and setting in meetings. But I still get to do some of the design with seasonal colors, so that's great to keep me connected. And then I'm out for sure 1 or 2 days a week just doing walks and inspections and looking to, because it's not that we're not paying attention, but it's so easy again to get used to your routine area that sometimes we overlook things. Mm-hmm. And so we all rely on each other's eyes to see what needs to be done or what may need freshening up, and then we try to budget accordingly. So and early on, man, I was out there digging and planting as well, but now it's kind of evolved into a bigger thing with all of our different shops. You know, before we didn't have designers or the installers. It was strictly maintenance and some shop support. So early on, I was out digging and helping and love that. But now that we've kind of got it all into place and everybody's working and moving part of the car or the wheel, if you will, now I'm that extra set of eyes to instill some design stuff. So I'm never bored. The days go fast. I love my job for sure.
About how many people do you have under?
Right now we have about 50 full-time employees.
A large crew.
It is a big crew, and some people say, wow, you know, but over 800 acres, so it's still, I have some zones where I only have one person in a zone, or maybe two. So to get that attention to detail down in the central part of campus requires more people.
Well, and it's not just landscaping in there too.
That's right. So that includes the designers, the urban forest, the installation group. No, the biggest group of them would be maintenance, though, for sure. That's my biggest shop. And then we do try to hire about 20 students each year. And we offer 3 internships, one in urban forestry, one in design, one in landscape management. And we've done, this will be our 3rd year. And that's been really successful. And our students, we always seem to have openings, but it's interesting because it's hot work, weed eating and string trimming in the summer. And we want them 40 hours in the summer, and then they can do part-time 20 hours or less in the school year. Mm-hmm. Now they need to, you know, we don't want them doing 1 or 2 hours. It doesn't make sense to clock in and then get back out on campus, but blocks of 4 hours or so. But we have had some really good students too. Some that as we've finally gotten a few new positions here, there's some we've actually hired on that were students getting degrees here. Yeah.
You've done your job well.
Well, there's some great success stories there with some really sharp employees. Like I said, everybody's interest is different on our crew. Some have the degree, some have the passion, some it has a different degree, but they just like being outside. And some will tell you that after they've mowed a lawn, they just love the way that looks, those patterns and how clean and how that changes. And that's what I love, is that they take pride in what they do, no matter, again, I've got one, all he does is help keep sidewalk spills cleaned up in a very prominent area and picking up trash and gum. And he takes such pride in that. It's just remarkable. So, good group.
Does your yard at home look just as good?
Well, when I had the greenhouse business, I overdid it with designs and things. Now, it looks okay, but I don't make it too crazy because, like I said, I've got teenagers, and so evenings are usually with them and their projects and stuff. So I get my fix on campus still, and it looks okay, but it would not be what people would expect probably to be on a garden tour.
I think I read somewhere that President Hargis made the statement that this is our front yard.
It is.
And we should take pride in it.
Yes, so. That is exactly.
And we've conducted a lot of interviews with alumni, and they always mention the way the campus looks. I mean, it's that sense of place, nostalgia, memory, whatever, goes with it.
All those things go into play for sure. So.
And you have a big part to play in that.
Well, yeah, good group of staff for sure, and great support from administration. Yeah.
Yes.
Not only there, but facilities management. Like I said, we've kind of gone through a name change and an update and reorganization with our facilities management, which is utility folks and custodians and operations and maintenance and upholstery, and I mean there's so many different ones, and so landscape services is just a part of that. But the administration up there too also is very supportive in it, and we're just a part of that group, which makes it all work. And they make the buildings look good, and the heat and air and remodeling and painting and all those things. So we're all a team overall for how the campus looks, for sure.
And does the whole team have to help after tailgating has been so busy?
It's still right now landscape services predominantly, and we have staff working during the game, and then the cleanup is afterwards. Now we'll use student help as well afterwards, and then we will on certain events we may take some other volunteers from other shops, because if college game day comes here, or it's the big games with our rivals, it gets crazy.
More and more tents. I mean, there's more
yes,
and more
absolutely.
Tents.
Last year we were listed as one of the top 10 tailgating universities in the nation, which is hard to believe, but it's huge. It is, and that you bring this up, and a lot of people ask me, how can you stand that? How can you walk around? And because I go to the games and I will walk around. Now I do have a different vision on it, but I don't let it stress me out for the most part, because what I've been seeing are the benefits of those people coming back to campus. Like I say, you'll see there's always a few that tear things up and leave trash and make a mess, but for the most part, folks are walking around and taking pictures and walking and expanding and going to different parts of campus to see what it looks like, and like I say, clean up after themselves. They don't come here to purposefully tear it up, but when you have 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people, depending on the game, all standing in the same location week after week, it has an impact on it. So we do have some litter stuff. We have to do aeration, fescue. Everybody wants to just tailgate under shade. Well, the only thing you can grow under shade trees would be fescue, and fescue does not like foot traffic. So it may be perfectly green and beautiful in August, September when school starts. Within weeks of tailgating in the same spot, it can become bare dirt. So we have to reseed or resod. So there's some maintenance things that go on. And we're starting to get some funds from some of the different groups to help support that effort. But we also are designing for tailgating. So, and we didn't talk about that, earlier, but in our landscape master plan, some of those prioritized areas, but one's not been funded, but man, it's designed for foot traffic and for vehicular traffic to pull up and park a trailer and then leave. We have some smaller ones that have been implemented with paver sites and certain kinds of trees where they can tie tents to. So we're designing to accommodate it. And I think as the campus changes, and gosh, we know that it is doing it on a daily basis with all the new buildings, where some of the new green spaces will finally happen, we have a design and concepts already for accommodating tailgating, making it a little bit more user-friendly.
How many years is this plan? Is it 10 years, 20 years?
Well, it's I'm trying to remember how long it was before it was updated. Typically, they're about 20 years. In ours, and that may have not quite been 20, but I think we have targeted 15 to 20 years for sure.
So you can't retire until time for the next one.
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I can go that long, but.
It's been a good move for you.
Yes,
Sounds like for OSU chose wisely.
Well, and I'm indebted for the opportunity. You know, like I say, I really don't want to take the credit because there's way too many people that have the vision that are helping make it happen. I just get to, like I say, be along for the ride and help guide and direct a little bit.
Your voice at the table.
A voice at the table, that is for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing your
You're
voice
welcome.
with me today. It's
You're
been
welcome.
a pleasure.